So today I'm delighted to be joined by Mike Wilds, who's a racing driver. There's many things we could say about you, Mike, but I think it's just fair to say you're a racing driver. Welcome. How are you?
I'm very well, Diana. Thank you. Lovely to see you. Looking so well.
Thank you very much. I've had a bit of sun.
Haven't we all?
Most people have. Mike, first thing I wanted to ask you, you've still got a career as a racing driver. You've got a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge. Can you recall the first time you drove on a professional racetrack?
I can, even though it was many, many years ago. In fact, it was 56 years ago. I grew up in West London in Chiswick, and there was a garage in the high street called the Checkered Flag. And my brother raced motorcycles, but I was fascinated by the sports cars and racing cars that the Checkered Flag was selling. So I was always at the garage windows looking. I would go up on my bicycle and look through the windows, and eventually they asked me in and they offered me a Saturday job washing cars. So that's where my passion started. They were running Formula Junior cars for Roy Pike and Ross Grenville. And they asked me if I'd like to go to Brands Hatch. I did. And it was a bit of a eureka moment. As soon as I got out of the truck, Chaz Beattie drove us in the transporter to Brands Hatch. I knew this is how I wanted to spend my life. There was a noise, an atmosphere. It was absolutely wonderful. And it was a moment that would give the direction of my life. So I spent every waking hour, how could I buy a racing car? And if I worked in bars when I left school in the evenings, I was an apprentice photographer. My father and my brother were photographers, and that was deemed to be the way I should go. But I eventually saved up enough for a deposit. I joined the 750 Motor Club, and a man called Lou Bergonzi was selling a little DRW racing car. It was an 1172 Formula car. And he said, well, it was £280. I had about £50 saved. My mother stood guarantor for the balance, and we borrowed the money. And he said, well, you best drive the car first. I agreed to buy it. So we went to Silverstone on the club circuit, and we weren't allowed to use the pit garages. We had to park on the side of the club straight. And I can remember sitting in it and driving it for the first ever time, and it was just the best feeling ever.
I mean, clearly I can see it in your face. You can recall that moment, and as you said, you just knew instinctively that was going to be your career.
Yeah, yes, every waking hour, and I really mean that. I was gripped by passion, and okay, I'm old now, in my mid-70s, but I can't get rid of that passion, and it will be with me forever.
Well, it's part of the character, isn't it? And thank God, you know, we all want to make sure, we all want to know that we can just keep doing what our passion and what our careers desire. But Mike, you went on to actually race in Formula One in the 70s. I think you did 8 races. How tough was it?
It was tough to get there. I did my first Grand Prix in October 1974 at Watkins Glen, and the journey, if you had 10 or 11 hours, I could tell you the journey from that first drive in the DRW through to getting to drive in the American Grand Prix. It was finally the achievement of my ambition that I had when I walked into the Checkered Flag and saw their racing cars that day and went to Brands Hatch with them. I wanted to be a Grand Prix driver. Sadly, I probably wasn't quite good enough to be a Grand Prix racing driver. Therefore, I didn't drive a competitive Formula One. I couldn't get my backside into a Ferrari, a McLaren M23, or a Brabham BT44 at the time. So as a journeyman racing driver, you had to drive what you could get, which was generally a team that didn't have large budgets and were back end of the grid cars, if you like.
I wanted to ask you sort of how important was it to keep knocking on doors to get the drive, and also bearing in mind in the 70s there was a lot of fatalities on track. So from what you've just said there, you know, you would take any drive to do it. Did that ever so the first question is, did that ever cross your mind? Was the safety element there, or was it a case of, I really want this drive, I'll make the most of it?
I lost friends. I lost a lot of good friends, very, very sadly. But it was always that mindset. It will not happen to me. So I never, ever got in a racing car thinking this might be the last time I ever drive a racing car. It didn't occur to me. The passion overrode everything, really. I was very lucky when I got the DRW. I entered my first race at Snetterton in May '65 and I came third. I then had to save up to do another race. I went to Silverstone and came second, and went to the third race and it was at Silverstone again. So I know Silverstone, and I won it. And I spoke to a man called Anthony Salmon, who was the secretary of the BRDC. I'm very proud to be a member of the BRDC, but I went up to him and I said, I've seen Sterling Moss with your badge and I'd like to join your club, please. And he tapped me on the head and said, thank you very much. That would be very nice. He said, but go away and come back when you're a racing driver. And it sort of urged me on to be a racing driver. And when I signed for BRM at the end of 1974, after my American Grand Prix with Ensign, BRM approached me to drive in 1975, and Anthony Salmon, it was lovely at the racing car show. I was doing slot cars with James Hunt. We were having a bit of fun. He got me in a lot of trouble. And
maybe that's for another day, Mike.
Absolutely. Over a gin and tonic. He came up to me and it was a lovely moment. He said, I remember you from years ago. I remember your name. I think you're a racing driver now. We'd like to invite you to be a member, which was wonderful.
Well, you certainly, you know, the achievement to get there must have been fantastic. So I'll go back to that earlier question.
Sorry.
How important, no, it was me, I went on a different tangent, but how important was it to keep knocking on the doors?
I was incredibly lucky, and I think you have to have, if you have passion, you want to talk to people about motor racing. And the little DRW I bought, I had to sell eventually because I had so much debt. It had to go to pay off the debts. So what do you do? A wannabe racing driver, I needed to be close to motor racing, so I joined the Firestone Racing Division on tyres, and I worked with JW and Ferrari and so on at Le Mans and 1000K races and at Grand Prix. So I was close to racing. I was meeting people, talking to people, seeing if I could become a racing driver. I was very lucky to talk to two people in my life. One was a man called John Cavell, and another was Jeremy Sumner. John Cavell I raced against in Formula 4. I scrounged to drive in a single-seater, and John came up to Mallory Park one day and said, Mike, how are you taking Gerard's? Where do I brake and change down? So I said, it's flat out in top gear, John. You don't brake, you don't change down, because they were only little imp engine cars. They were just flat all the way around apart from the hairpin. And he looked at me and he said, thanks, Mike. I don't think I'm ever going to be a racing driver. So he went and talked to his father and they bought me my first Formula 3 car. And he and I are still best friends today. But we didn't have the money to run it. I scrounged a race in a Chevron B8 from Jeremy Sumner. He said, yes, you can race it if you bend it, you mend it. I didn't have any money, but yes, fine. He said, I'll do the GT race, you do the Formula Libre race. It will be single-seaters, you won't stand a chance. The heavens opened and it rained. And for some reason, I love racing in the rain. I've won a lot of races in the rain. And I won the Royal Tunbridge Wells Trophy, a Formula Libre race, in this little Chevron B8. And it was the day that changed my life, really, because they said, or Jeremy Sumner said, my goodness, I have to help you. So he introduced me to a company called Dempster Developments, who were friends who wanted to start a race team. And they said they would back me in Formula 3 with John and Jack Cowell's car. And we did 3 championships. I couldn't believe it. We did the 2 British championships and the European championships. I didn't have time to go to work. So they said, okay, we'll pay your wages. You'll be a driver for us. And I was suddenly a professional racing driver. Very, very lucky.
Yeah, but an incredible story. But also I'm thinking you clearly were never, ever just going to give up, were you?
No, never. Not even now. I still want to race cars. And probably this year I signed a wonderful agreement to race a car for a gentleman this year, which was going to be stunning. My favorite race, I love Formula One. I would love to have stayed there, but I couldn't. I adore racing at Le Mans. I managed only to race there 7 or 8 times, but sensational motor race. For a racing driver, it throws everything at you. And I signed this year to drive for a lovely man called Rainer Becker, and he's got the ex-Mario Andretti Porsche 956 that came 3rd at Le Mans in '83, and I was going to do the Peter Auto Group C series, and then it all stopped, which was very sad.
It is. Will it come back? Do you know? Is it?
I hope so. Rainer
he
has been in touch, and hopefully there's a possibility we could do Paul Ricard at the end of July, Monza in September. So hopefully we'll get 2 or 3 races in before the end of the year.
On this show, we've talked a lot about, not with yourself yet, but we've talked a lot about performance and mind management. So it strikes me that when you started racing, were you aware of the importance of mind management, or was that your just core determination, which we know all understand now is how we can motivate and
yes, I mean, motor racing has changed a great deal. When I did it, there really wasn't any commercial sponsorship, even in Formula One. When I started to race, Marlboro were just coming in, Yardley were coming in. When I was racing through the 60s and 70s, it was really a sport. Sadly, I now feel Formula One and a lot of racing is a business. And I feel sorry about that, really.
Is there something missing from your experience to current day? What is it? Just the commercialized side of it that's missing? Do you think there's a bit of the atmosphere, the sort of realities of stuff that happens that we have to just react to, that's more controlled?
Yeah, I think I was very lucky. Porsche said they had a spare Carrera Cup car the end of 2018. So I did a Carrera Cup race, the oldest man ever. I was coming up 73 at the time. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to come last. It's going to be awful, but I have to do it. And I didn't come last. I was nowhere near the front, but I didn't come last, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But it was so different, Diana. After I had 2 half-hour test sessions on the Friday, and I did 2 races, one on the Saturday, one on the Sunday. And after the practice sessions, it was getting to my neck a bit, because the modern GT cars have such grip level. The G-forces are really quite high. And I was sort of feeling my neck a little bit, and somebody came up to me, in the Porsche hospitality. I said, oh, you have a problem? Yes, come this way. And I was taken to a lovely room, and there was a masseuse, and they sorted my neck, and it was totally different. So I totally understand that young racing drivers nowadays, the stresses that they're put through in the car. It wasn't so bad when I was in Formula One, because they were quite powerful, but they had very large tyres and not much aero, so the cars would slide. So the G-forces weren't that bad. But nowadays in LMP1 and GT cars, I think the stresses and strains, and the commercialism puts a lot of pressure on young drivers. It wasn't the case. My passion was the overriding thing I didn't think about in here. All I was thinking about all the time was just sitting in a racing car and driving it to the best of my ability. The one thing that stands out above anything else from my era in the 70s and even in the 80s to now, and I feel it's such a great shame, I think there's a lack of respect between competitors. I knew in Formula 5000, for instance, that if I lunged Brian Redman or who are friends, David Hobbs, Peter Gethin, Teddy Pillett, all these people, if I lunged, I could kill them. It didn't occur to me I could kill them, but I could hurt them possibly. So you drove and you fought with them with respect. And I think that's missing nowadays. The circuits are so much wider and safer, that there's a lot of contact and, unfortunately, in my opinion, a lack of respect between competitors, some competitors.
Looking at the sport, your experience, everything that you've done as a racing driver, still doing as a racing driver and instructor, what is it about the sport, even with all these changes of where we are up to the current day, that makes you want to keep being part of it?
It's not only the driving, it's not only the getting in a race car, sitting on a grid. I love that fear. I still get nervous when I get in a racing car. It's stupid, really, but you need that to get your adrenaline going, and it gives you a degree of safety that I won't go past a certain line, where probably when I was in my 20s, I would push the limits a little more than I would now. It's very difficult to put into words. It still comes back to that word passion again. I don't think that passion will ever go away. I don't know why I'm looking so forward to traveling to Brands Hatch this afternoon, staying at the hotel at Brands Hatch, getting up in the morning and going testing a racing car tomorrow. It's lunacy, really, at my age, but I can't get it out of my system. I'm sure there are youngsters who do it because, youngsters because their parents would rather they do it. Yeah. And their parents can afford it, and they're very privileged and they go and do it. I wonder sometimes whether they do have that passion to do it. I could be wrong.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think it's a way of life. It's part of who you are. It's part of who I am as a broadcaster in motorsport. I love it, and you miss it when you're not doing it, because it's just instant, happens, change, gone, on to the next one. And it's just sort of a bit like getting up every day and it's a new day. And I think that's the most exciting thing about it.
I've just remembered, really going back to what I was saying before, it's not only the competition of sitting on the grid, getting that adrenaline flowing. Everything around motorsport, I really enjoy. You know, meeting people like yourself, like-minded people. I've made some unbelievably good friends from people I've banged wheels with and really raced hard against. But they're some of my best, okay, maybe friends is the wrong word, they're my best acquaintances, because I don't see them all the time and go to the pub, but when I get to a racetrack, I'll see Ian Flux or Derek Bell or all these drivers, and it's as though I had a pint with them last week, even though I might not have seen them for 12 months. I love that camaraderie side of motorsport, which will never go away.
No. And long may it continue. Mike, look, it's been fantastic chatting to you. Thank you so much. And I certainly look forward to seeing you for a cup of coffee or something at a circuit very soon.
I look forward to it. Thanks, Diana.